Hello everyone, welcome to a new GM session recap. I just finished my weekend with my homies. We played 3 sessions over 2 days and long sessions at that. And it was crazy. It was great. It was wonderful. I'm drinking Samuel Adams Porch Rocker Lemon Radler from one of my friends coming from Boston. So it's an American beer. So yeah, this recap will be something else because it was exceptional. It was a really great 2 days for all sorts of reasons beyond RPGs too. But let's just say that a lot happened, and I've lived some new situations in the game that I haven't lived before in terms of number of opponents, power levels, and all of that. So I sort of got to experience a bit higher level gameplay in Symbaroum during these sessions. So at the end of this recap, I will come back on that point, on the fact that it's an asymmetric system. I will come back on that at the end. But first of all, let's jump into the recap of session 46. Cheers to that. So session 46 starts with the barbarian Mirizin. Oh, that's strange. That's a strange beer. I don't know what it tastes like. It's a bit sweet. It's got something of a lemon flavor. I mean, it's more like juice than beer, but anyways. Okay. Mirizin the Barbarian is possessed by the crown of the king Urian Loapak. He's on the back of a beeman that is actually an elf that shape-shifted into a beeman. They're going through the snow, and they are going to meet Godrai, an older elf, which has an elk. Those 2 elves were first met in Priospas at the very beginning of this campaign during the Promised Land adventure. And so when we start the session, I just describe that he's going through the forest, that the snowstorm is very soft. It's almost non-existent around them as they move forward. And behind him, Wild and Beau are trying to catch up in their trail, but they have the full force of the blizzard in their face. And Beau is scared of going alone in the forest following these elves, so he says to Wild, I will go back to the loggers' camp and get some backup. Wild says, okay, go, but I will keep on going because I don't want to lose them. So Wild keeps on going alone. That's where I use my little home rule for traveling in the snow, using strong tests that I had in my prep. Little calculations here of what how many moves the rolls would give, and I asked for 5 rolls at a time. So for 5 rolls, 5 turns, Mirizin, the beeman, they move three movement increments, if you want. So it's like plus 15 for their move. And Wild has to roll, and if he makes a critical, he'll get 3. If he succeeds as strong, he'll get 2. If he fails, he'll get 1. If he fumbles, he gets none. So, of course, they're gaining some distance, and that was purposeful. I wanted because I wanted to have some distance between the 2, so when Mirizin will meet Godrai, they will lose some rounds there without moving, and during that time Wild can catch up. So if Wild is fast enough, he could arrive on the scene when the elves are dealing with Mirizin. So we do those rolls. I just note down the distances. I describe a bit of his efforts through the snow and all that. During that time, Beau goes back to the house, so I cut away to the house. They have a little discussion there. They decide to send some people off. They're a bit scared of leaving the mages alone behind because there's some dragouls still around The dragons that were eating the horse just fled into the forest, so they're still around, maybe. So they decide to send Bo, Lodemé, and I think Gonkai wanted to go. Yeah, Gonkai, because Gonkai is there to see elves, so he wants to go. And Mirizin, the flaming servant, Flamma, Vernum, and Idogai, the Tinkerer Mage, stay behind at the loggers' camp. As we know, some things will happen there later on. So when I prepped, I knew that this would be a possibility. So Baumelo coming with a big group was logical in the story, but also was a way for me to make sure that the split party would have some events happening to them, so no player would be just left out for hours, you know. So that's really important. You need to create something. It could have been something else. It could have been, I don't know. I could brainstorm on that and find some other ideas, but the important thing was that I needed something to happen to the logger camp in case they decided to stay there, which that they did. So I move back to Mirizin. He arrives at the location of Godrai, the senior elf, and he finds him meditating, concentrating on his weather ritual. I have him concentrating because it's like a homebrew thing, because the elves are powerful. They can change the nature of the weather. The normal ritual, it just lets you create a new weather condition, and then it goes on from there as long as you maintain it. So I wanted this to be more powerful, where he can zoom in on some characters, and especially his allies. He can modify the weather around them while having another weather elsewhere. So Mirizin arrives. He's still under the possession of the crown, but the crown understands that these elves want to bring it back to its home. So right now it's happy, and it urges Mirizin to follow them. The elf opens his eyes, jumps off the rock he was sitting on, comes forward, beckons Mirizin forward with a sentence in Elvish that he doesn't understand. Mirizin drops off the horse, the beeman, the big bear, and comes forward with the crown in his hands. And the elf starts speaking in Elvish, but he's actually speaking to Urian Loapak. And he's asking Urian to let go of this mortal. Of course, that's just me. I knew it. So I said, you hear, he's talking to somebody. You don't feel it's you. And of course, Urian Loapak does not want to. And so Godrai decides to try to confront him using bend will. So he attacks. He tries to bend the will of Mirizin and to wrest him out of the control of Urian Loapak. So it's like a contested role between Urian Loapak and Godrai. And Godrai fails after concentrating, and you see effort on his face and everything. And he fails. And he says to the beeman, "Okay, let's move. Let's go with the human, And so the beeman beckons to Mirizin to go back on his back, and he does, and they leave towards the north. And that's where they make a little curve to go by the dolmen. And at the dolmen, the beeman transforms into elvish form. Of course, I didn't describe that because I wanted to keep some suspense. So I just said they're leaving to the north, and then I cut back to Wild. But in my mind, I knew that they were trying to lose any pursuit at the dolmen. So Wild follows again all the way to the dolmen, which is like 40 moves away from the beginning. And he arrives at the dolmen. I described the dolmen under the snow with the bushes and everything. He goes to see the tracks. There's big tracks around the dolmen near the brush. And they wanted to give a bit of an impression that they might have went in under the trees inside the dolmen. But actually they left to the north in single file, and the beeman transformed into elvish. So it was just a single file of humans and an elk. So they tried to make it as discreet as possible. Um, Wild succeeds at noticing that, but he sees inside the brush some some lights, some whitish luminescent light. So he's wondering, what's this? So he cracks under the brush, the bushes, and big ogre form cracking through. He gets closer to this source of light. He actually goes beyond the trees and finds the opening of a cave, and inside these lights that are actually the silhouette of a man, of a dead man with a long spear and an old helmet and hollow eyes. And so he's of course he freezes on the spot. It's a frostlight, okay, one of the weakest specters that exist. I use because as I've said often, okay, there's a bit of traffic right now. As I said often, the way to maneuver power levels and things like that in a game, especially when you're still learning the game, is to use waves, to start slow and add enemies if the first enemies you put were too weak. In most situations, it's realistic. Like in this situation, for example, these specters are sort of coming in and out of the spirit world. They're attracted to heat of the living. So he meets a first frostlight, and then a second one will arrive, and others could come if I needed to. But I didn't know how Wild would fare, and he was alone. So I found it more interesting to start with one, to have this one-on-one confrontation. And at first he backs up and he says, okay, I won't go further. I will leave you alone. And the frostlight comes really close, but slowly, a bit curious. So Wild is wondering what's going on. And the frostlight sort of exhales a kind of sound and stretches a hand. And Wild, to show that he's not aggressive, drops his staff and puts a knee to the ground to say, I come in peace, because he notices that this thing is faster than him in the snow. And the frostlight just comes in and puts his hand on his face, in his head, and he is completely frozen on the spot, and it's just a horrible feeling that I described at the time. And he loses 3 points of strength immediately. And he goes, "Wah!" and he backs off, and the creature pursues him, and another one appears from the back, and so he tries to maneuver out, but he lost a few. I don't know. I think he lost 6. He got hit 2 times in the 2 first rounds, and when this happens, of course, all this time that he was searching, examining, I sort of counted the rounds in my head, and that's where it's more narrative time than actual time, because when we were doing the 5 rolls of move in the woods, I was thinking every turn would be about 5 minutes of walking or something, or maybe a few minutes of walking. But now that we're in a combat situation, the turns are just normal combat rounds, and it doesn't really matter, because dramatically you expect that if friends are coming up in the back, they have a chance to get there in time, and the dice will decide if they succeed to arrive in time or not. So the actual distance of where they are exactly dramatically doesn't have any importance if you keep it vague and elastic from the start. Of course, if you start setting boundaries like okay, now the 1 minute of walking is 300 yards in the snow and blah blah blah, then you're stuck with your realism. You can't move out of it, because okay, they're 2 kilometers away, they'll take 20 rounds to get there. When they get there, Wild is dead, and that's it. So some people like to play like that, like super realistic simulationist. I just think that for players, most of the time it's not fun. It's not fun because players want to play a role in a story, and stories are about conflict and surpassing yourself and all of that. And that's what you want to experience as a player. You don't want to just die realistically. That's not fun. So anyways, each to his own. If that's your style and you like it and your players like that, that's great. I mean, I'm not there to say it's better, but the way we play is that I try to stay as realistic as possible. I don't like to stretch the rule of cool that much, but I do use the rule of cool, and especially I would say it's not cool. I don't really care about cool, but it's the rule of dramatic timing. Dramatic timing is really important. That's what any screenwriter or playwright will tell you. Anyways, so of course the dice will decide in the end, and the dice can be disappointing. So in this case, Lodemé is charging through with Bo and Gonkai behind her, and they make the rolls, and Lodemé does a few crits and like a really good rolls, and they get to Wild. They get in sight of Wild as he's fighting these creatures. So it's pretty cool, because every round he was fighting for his life, and I would ask Lodemé for a strong roll to see how quickly she could get there. So there was a real suspense during the scene. And they start fighting with these two frostlights. And what really played against them is that at first they supposed that they couldn't, it's transparent, you can't hurt these things. So they didn't know. Nobody had beast lore undead. Bo and Lodemé went forward, Wild retreated behind them, and they sort of stood their ground. And in the first round, they parried and stuff like that, but they got hit because they failed their defense rolls. So I described that they didn't know that these creatures were transparent and could move through things. So they tried to block with their shields, and the spirits would just move through the shield and grab their arm or their heart. And so they lost some strong points. Bo is really weak, so he doesn't need to take a lot to die. So they were both really terrified, actually. They didn't know what can we do. And Gonkai, after casting Unnoticeable on himself, because he's that kind of man, the second round he put a flame wall between, actually a flame dome around them to keep these spirits out. And the spirits moved through the fire, taking some damage. They saw like the wisps of silvery light go up in flames. And so they noticed that, okay, they can take some damage. So in the next round, Wild lit a makeshift torch. And this battle with another wall of flame in another position, and they tried like to maneuver away from these creatures, and they Bo fell and was revived by Gonkai. And so it was a really tense fight. And Wild, I think, took 9 points of strong. Lodemé lost 6, I believe. And so they were pretty roughed up after that. And that's how I think that's how we finished the first session. No, actually, we the first night we played even further. What happened after the Frostlights is that Wild has this soulmate bond, and so he has an idea of Mirizin, how he's feeling and how distant he is from him. And so he felt that Mirizin was coming back, because after this fight with the Frostlights, I cut back to Mirizin, and Mirizin was getting cold because the elves decided, okay, he's possessed. We'll just move north to the tomb, and if the human dies, the human dies. It's sad, but it's not as important as their mission. So they were just going through the snow in silence for hours on end. They didn't get to that, but they were seemingly going to walk all night. And Mirizin started feeling really cold because they had fought, and he was really tired and everything. The younger elf came to him, looked him in the eye, and just tried to grab the crown off of him. And so they had a contested strong roll, which he lost. So the elf ripped off the crown, and I had offered the player before that in the first scene with Godrai. I said, if you want to try to wrest your spirit away from Hurrian Loapak, you still have strength in you to try to fight back. But if you fail this roll, your next roll might be in a day or two. You might stay possessed for a longer time before you get another roll. And so at that time, the player said, no, for now, I just want to follow the elves. They seem to know what they're doing. At this time, when the elf tries to rip out the crown, he decides, okay, this is the moment I have to get rid of this influence. He rolls his resolute versus resolute. He fails. He uses an XP. He rolls again, and he crits. And that was awesome. And so he's freed from the influence of Hurrian Loapak, which automatically tries to possess the young elf and succeeds. The young elf, has a vacant stare. The older elf gives him an order. The younger elf does not agree anymore. Hurrian Loapak is starting to suspect that maybe he just needs to get this elf at the tomb as quickly as possible. So the elf starts running north. The older elf leaves with the elk following that elf and turns around one last time to Mirizin, who of course doesn't follow. And he just sort of nods. It's not clear what his facial expression meant, but he looks one last time at Mirizin. And in my mind, it's that he looks one last time at the blessed of Oroke, the kissed by Oroke man, and sort of makes a mental note of this human for further use. And so Mirizin starts running south. So after the fight with the Frostlights, Wild knows that Mirizin is safe and is coming back. And so they decide to just try to heal up a bit. There's a few failed Medicus tests and stuff. I allow one test of Medicus and lay on hands per day, per character, whether it fails or succeeds. So if you fail, you fail. That's it. So healing is quite swingy. So they've healed a bit, but not that much. And Mirizin is running back. And that's when I cut away to the logger camp. What's happening there? And what's happening there, of course, is that they're starting to make some food and everything. The flaming servant is outside having watch, and this flaming servant knocks at the door. Mikariol, the pyromancer, opens the door, and the flaming servant points 300 yards in the woods. There's some little lights that seem like torchlight coming up, because it's now nighttime, or almost, and there's a group coming. So they all go outside, they look, they wait a bit. At 200 yards, 100 yards, they start to notice first the sounds of weapons, armor, and the numbers. They see that it's a big group. So they decide to flee, to just skedaddle. They go like at the back of the house to keep the house between them and the enemies, and they flee. Because they notice some yellow armbands, and they understand that the sellswords of the sun are part of this group, and so it bodes really badly. So they flee like that in the snow, and then a pursuit a new pursuit starts, where they make strong rolls to try to flee. The pursuers, I don't tell them anything about the pursuers, but I just say that, like, at some point they made a vigilant tests, and they noticed a faraway light, and they were in the woods. So they got the clue that that they were being followed. So they pressed their pace, and I had the group coming back from the dolmen. I had the ones fleeing from the house, and I had the pursuers. And everybody rolled to see who would catch who when, on that grid of 40 increments. Like from the house to the dolmen was about 40 increments. So we rolled blah blah blah, and what happened is that the group that had faced the Frostlights meet up with the ones that are fleeing just before the posse catches up, like when they're, I don't know, I don't remember exactly, but maybe 4 or 5 increments away. So we started the battle with just dice as characters on the table. It became pretty hard for me to follow hit points and stuff pretty quickly, but we did a few rounds like that, and wow, that was just the most crazy battle I ever GM'd. I think one of the craziest, anyways. So the first line of attack, there was some of Baumelo's men with crossbows with poison. There were the Rangers with their bows, the 2 Jackars, 10 or so sellswords of the sun, a few that are veterans, and a few that are really, like, most of them were youngsters, just people in normal clothes with mattocks and axes. And so that was the first wave, and they just wiped them out. Mikariol, like, first of all, Mikariol did a brimstone cascade of incredible strength. He just got some really good rolls on damage and on hits, and so he hit, I think, 10 characters. I think he killed 2, maimed 2 others, something like that. And so after this first super blast of brimstone cascade, a few of them, like the weaker ones, the sellswords and a few of Baumelo's men, started retreating and hiding and not being really active anymore. And then everybody sort of was charging in, and Gonkai was unnoticeable, and he put his unnoticeable effect on Bo, the goblin, so the goblin could flank. He put a wall of flame in the way, so the Rangers couldn't shoot at them with their bows. So there was such a masterful crowd control. It was crazy. There was the groups that were trying to flank the wall of flame. When they were seen, I always asked for vigilant rolls and stuff, so it wasn't like you can sneak around and not be seen, especially in a forest at night. But there were always some player succeeded is vigilant. And Vernum, I gave Mind Throw to Vernum at master level, so he could chain Mind Throw and causes 1d8 damage. They fall on their back. So it was really like blowing people away like leaves, So sometimes a little group would try to flank and get at the mages, and Vernum would just throw them in the woods, like disperse them like leaves. And the brimstone cascades were still coming down every round. And Ledemé, the Templar girl, she just, she would just go from one guy, slay him, to the next, slay him. So there was this monster of metal going around. So after this first few rounds, it was almost a rout on the bad guy's side, and we finished the game at that point. And I was thinking to myself as I went to bed, and I was like, oh my God, what did I do? Like, this big pussy of 32 people is being wiped out, like completely wiped out. This cannot do, And I knew that there was some really good rolls involved, so it wasn't representative of what it should have been. So the next day, when in the morning we started playing again, I created a battle map that I will put here so you can see a bit, to see the characters better, to have the GM layer where I can hide characters. For the hit points, it's much easier to follow and everything. And what happened, and I said, okay, their big guys haven't gotten involved yet, like Cerex Atio, Carlos, Roya Garlaca, and so the first line are the weaklings. They've been half routed or neutralized. The leaders in the back are taking good note of what's going on and what they need to do, and they're going to counterattack, which they did. And so we had a second round, a second wave, with a Roya Garlaca sneaking in the woods with three other guys with her, to try to get to the mages in the back. The two knights with sort of rallied their rangers. They sent the Jackars into the fray. The battle Jackars are really, really dangerous creatures, very offensive and very, very tough. And they started hacking away. Serix Atio put the ogre Wild down in one strike. Lodemé came after him in the back, and he almost killed her in one strike too. She fell in the snow. She lost 13 toughness points. She was almost dead, but she was minded. Like, she has bloodthirst, so she was okay. I'm just gonna get back up and kill him. But I was thinking, okay, that's almost two of the toughest PCs that are down right there. And then Beau arrives, and he's sneaking, flanks Serix Atio, and crits him, and does 6. Because my house rule for crits is that it's 1d6 damage straight to toughness, and he rolls a 6. So Serix Atio goes down to 9 in one rapier strike under the armpit, and he's quickly surrounded. At that same time, when things are starting to seem grim a bit, Gonkai does a mirroring image, so there's tons of Gonkais everywhere. So he stymies Kargoi. Kargoi is just swiping at the sorcerers and the mages and these illusions, and he's in fury. And Mirizin arrives at the same time as backup. He was running all the time from the north, and he finally arrives, and he gets into the fray too. And the thing that could have, at that point, the thing that could have saved Kargoi and Serix is if Roya Garlaca had been successful. But unfortunately, she was sneaking in the woods. There was one PC in the woods under unnoticeable effect, Idogai. And Idogai had a super hard vigilant roll to make, and he succeeded. So he noticed Roya and her team going by, and he ran back to the others and yelled, "They're coming through the woods," and blah, blah, blah. And so Roya charged as fast as she could, but they couldn't get there in time. And Vernum just blew her up in a tree. It was like they got blown away with Mind Throw. They're not very strong. They're scouts. They're agile and quick, but they're not strong. And you need to be strong to resist a Mind Throw. So that sort of failed. Two of them succeeded at attacking Micariol and Vernum, but they just had the time to make little wounds before some backup came, and they basically got mopped up. And as soon as Serix and Kargoi, they had a moment of glory when Serix almost killed Lodemé and had killed Wild. Kargoi was yelling in glee, and that was the low point in the battle for the PCs. And Kargoi was rejoining with Serix, and he was, "Ha ha ha! We will kill these scum of the dark and these, I don't remember what I said exactly, but it was really a yell of glee. And I was thinking, if some PCs must die right now, I need to make these enemies as hateable as possible, so they will be very, very vengeful in later sessions. But what happened is that when that happened, Gonkai put a flame wall between Kargoi and Serix, so Kargoi couldn't come to his friend's help immediately. And Beau did his crit. Then Mirizin arrived, and Lodemé got up and struck, and so there were 3 of the best fighters against Serix, and he died. And he was put to death by Lodemé at the end, because she's bloodthirsty. And he still... Actually, no, it was Beau that put him to death. Lodemé killed Kargoi Salamos after that. And so the two heroes of the Great War, the 2 great paladins of Thistlehold, died that night. And that was momentous. And so once that happened, the rest of the crew fled. They cried retreat. It was almost a rout. Roya Garlaca she just fled orderly, and they met up with Bomelo and the rest. So there were still 15 of them left after this, but they sort of lost half of their forces in that first encounter. So they were on the retreat. Mirizin followed them and shot one down at, I think he was like at 100 yards, because they were following the wider trail that they had been through multiple times, all the groups. So he still had a sight on the guy, and so he had -10 to hit, and he aimed. So he had 2 rolls, and he got him on the second roll with a crit, and so he killed a ranger with 1 bolt in the head at 100 yards in the night. That was completely crazy, and so they decided to let Bomelo and company go, and they moved 300 yards into the forest. Gonkai made a false terrain to hide them. Mirizin used his bushcraft and his forced march talent or something to help people rest, and they sort of recuperated as much as they could. And it's a long recap, guys, because it's been 3 sessions. We've played, I don't know how many hours, probably at least 12 hours of gameplay, probably around 15, but we're almost done. So the next day, they have a little chat. They're wondering how to deal with the consequences of this. They decide to send Gonkai and Wild, using 7 leagues tried, back to Thistlehold, to the shop, to Edegai's shop, so they can sort of talk to their allies in Thistlehold, because they suspect that Bomelo is spreading false rumors about what happened, and that's what they do. During that time, the rest of the group, they burn the bodies using flame walls, because they don't want them to come back as undead. And Mikariol takes the armor of Serexatio to make his new flaming servant. And they take the Mastercraft bastard sword of Cargoy Salamos and his armor, but they burned the bodies, and they go back to Thistlehold. So the last scenes of the 3rd session, if you want, of this game, is Wild and Gonkai. They're at the shop. They step outside to go quickly to the mayor's house, and they see that there's a guy in an alleyway spotting their house, and the guy disappears. They don't follow him. They just run like hell to the mayor's mansion, night home, and they get there. They get introduced. They succeed some critical persuade tests. They meet the mayor and the witch Yagaba alone, except for 2 elite guards inside the main room, the main banquet room. And the mayor is very, very concerned, and he explains to them that he has had the other story from Baumelo, and that it's not the same. Baumelo says that these characters stole the crown because they are sorcerers and they want to use the crown for themselves, and that they have raised dragouls in the forest, and with the help of these dragouls, they killed the heroes of the Great War, Cargoy and Serex, and that the PCs must be arrested and handed over to the church at minimum. And of course, Lacifar doesn't want to do that. Lacifar doesn't like the influence of the church, but he's being pressured by Elfeno and Baumelo, and he wants to keep the peace. He knows that a part of the population thinks that the fact that there's not a real, true rule of Prios in the city is exposing the city to dangerous consequences from the forest, like the snowstorm. So he explains that. So Wild basically tells him everything, and he also tells him that Cargoy Salamos has 2 dragouls in his basement. That's the trump card that could save them. So he says that, and I asked for the persuade because I'm thinking it's just like there's no witnesses, so it's what he says against what Baumelo says. And even if Lacifar is predisposed to like the PCs because of what they've done up to now, he's not crazy, and the PCs could be lying. So I ask for this persuade test, and he crits it. And he uses actually an XP to reroll and crit it. And so that actually he rolled a 20, and then he used an XP and rolled a 1. So that was a great PC decision right there. And so they so Lassifar believes him, but he explains to them that they need to be on house arrest while the inquiry will go through multiple witnesses and blah blah blah. But he tells them that, you know, I believe you, and if these dragouls are in fact in the basement, that will change things. But they need to go home. And when the rest of the group arrives, Marvello and his soldiers put them to house arrest again. And Marvello is also in on the true story and trusts he does a success with his persuade on Marvello. So the PCs are pretty much in a good spot with their allies, but their enemies are also working their political ties. So that will be what we'll see in the downtime to come, because now things are getting frozen. It's a frozen conflict, and that will be the downtime to get out of the winter and to come to summer. So that was, in a sense, what happened during this weekend of great play, great gaming. And just to finish, I would like to come to 2 points that are more like takeaways from this whole adventure. First of all, the power of magic. Magic can be really powerful, as I experienced firsthand in those scenes. To be fair, the first round, Mikariol had forgotten that it is resolute versus quick to do the brimstone cascade, so he had an easy go at it because the Rangers have a good quick, so probably the Rangers would have stopped the chain. But still, after that we remembered and we applied it, and he still did quite good damage. Mind Throw is crazy powerful in the hands of a master. You can really clear the way in front of you. So I might eventually impose some. At least what I think I will do for that is that when like the ones that succeeded at coming to them and trying to stab them, the mages, actually that's not what they would do. They would want to stop them from making their magic. So they would tackle them and hold them, or do something like that, or try to knock them out. Or just stabbing is not enough, because he did a bit of damage, and then he got mind thrown away. So yeah, so that's one thing I took note of. I really liked the tactical aspect with the walls of flame that changed the battlefield, and it's very cinematic, and I can understand that the mages are a true force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. So I will apply that in, like, my experienced soldiers will be even more wily. Like this time around, there were the Rangers and Roya Garlaka and Serex and Kargoy that were really experienced. All the rest, it was pretty riffraff, like little mercenaries and thugs and normal people. So it's normal that they didn't have the right strategies, and they didn't use their strengths as they should have. And the second point I wanted to talk about is the asymmetric system that is Symbaroum. That's what I really noticed, is that in this game you need, as a GM, to have some system mastery and to really analyze what the PC's strengths and weaknesses are, and to try to work on those. And if you don't have time to get that deep into the system, at least remind yourself that you can vary the dangers. Like, some monsters cause corruption, some do alternative damage to strength, or to resolute, so you can, using these different types of menaces, I would add to that all the things about entanglement, traps, hold, tackle, push off cliffs, knockouts, disarms. All those maneuvers are all ways to attack the weaknesses of the players. And I think that if you just mix things around as much as you can, you will get very different results in your combat scenes. Like the fact that they struggled that much against 2 Frostlights, which was partly due to their ignorance, but still, 3 damage straight to strength for most PCs means that you're down in 3 hits. So it's really scary and really dangerous. And I really like the fact that when the PCs are in the right tactical position, they are really powerful and potent. And I know that for players that is a great feeling. Like if you spent 60 XP to be master at Brimstone Cascade, you want to kick ass with your Brimstone Cascade. Like if every time you do it nothing happens, or just light burns here and there, you start wondering, well, why did I spend those XP? What am I useful for? So you have to give them their cake, you know? You can't just always go for their weaknesses. So try to stay in the flavor of the faction. Like witches will have different resources than Templars. You need to respect the logic of the faction. But if you add in a little 1 or 2 characters that are more roguish, or that have different powers that can really hinder the PCs, or maybe some lesser artifacts, some drone spores, some poison, some traps, some entanglement tools, all those things can really spice up a confrontation and really keep it varied and different. And that's for me is a big strength of the game, is to have the right tools to make every combat as unique and interesting as possible. But that's how I would conclude about the asymmetric nature of the system. I think it's a big plus for the system, and I think that the GM guide gives some good guidance, but doesn't go that deep into how you can use it to really maximize the fun. But it's there. And I'm really happy to have all these toys to play with, the same way that the players have many abilities to play with too. So it is a bit clunky to have all those abilities all the time, and you need to refer, but using the apps and using different tools, you can pretty much get the essentials right. And even if you forget a little rule on the side once or twice, doesn't matter, as long as we're having fun and learning on the way. And yeah, and that's it for this video, for this mega recap. I'd like to know if you like this format where I separate recaps from preps from rules videos that I will be making. I'll do one on my home rules. I'm aiming for about 10 minutes each, 10 to 15 minutes. This one is super long because there were 3 sessions in effect, 3 long sessions in this case. So it's not a normal recap, but the further recaps will be shorter. So please tell me in the comments if you like that format, if you have some topics you'd like me to talk about, or to give some time of thought about. And please, if you want to support me and support this channel, well, you can go on to play Drive-Thru-RPG to see Playing with Goblins, my adventure. You can, of course, commenting and liking really makes a difference. And if you're interested on more, you can head on to NotreCinémaMaison.com to just watch a few of my short films and learn a bit about my filmmaking career. Okay, so keep it bright, keep it light, have fun. I hope you have some great gaming planned for this summer, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.